It gives me enormous pleasure to bring out to the stage for your enjoyment the CEO of Great Place to Work, Michael Bush.
Please welcome to the stage, Michael C. Bush, CEO of Great Place to Work.
Hey. Good to see everybody. Chris, thank you very much for that warm welcome and introduction. I'm here. I'm really happy to be here. So let's get started. Our story today starts November 14th, 1915. This was the death of Booker Teleferio Washington. People called him Booker T. Washington because Teleferio was pretty hard to pronounce. He was one of the most amazing black men in our history. He was born a slave, became a free man, and became an advisor to 3 presidents of the United States. An amazing person. He also created the 6th historically black college, Tuskegee Institute. March 18th, 1916, another big day. That was the birth of my father. He was named after Booker T. Washington. He was born in a small town, Barnesville, Georgia, really small town, rural town. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that later. But I want to move to May 1943. This is when he graduated from Tuskegee Institute, the historically black college founded by his namesake. He got his degree in construction. He was a builder. He helped build the runways for the Tuskegee Airmen. The only reason he wasn't in the syphilis experiments is because he had work to do on the runways. Good for him. And I have his yearbooks, and I look through them, and one of the things I notice is how the class sizes drop every year because people were taken out of college and sent to World War II. Fortunately for him, he had flat feet. As soon as he graduated, he left. A lot of people, as soon as they could, left the South. And the way they did it, it was called the Great Migration, which is the greatest migration in human history. The movement of black Americans from the South into the northeast part of the United States or to the West, all searching for something better. And they did it by train, but it was a perilous route. People like my father got on the train, and at night he'd be thrown off the train for no good reason. So it was a long terror trip, but my father made it. And he went to Oakland, California, because for some reason he had a dream that his kids would go to UC Berkeley. None of us did. But that was his dream, that one day would happen. And he was looking for work, and he was good with his hands. So there was a lot of work going on thanks to World War II. There were Kaiser shipyards, Kaiser steel, Kaiser aluminum. In California, it was Kaiser everything. And he got a job in one of the shipyards. He was one of these people. Now, I don't know what you see when you look at this picture. A lot of times people walk into a room and they look and they see who's there. I look and see who isn't there. So when I look at this picture, I scan it immediately and I see 3 black people. I can't help it. My life's experience just causes me to do that. 1945, amazing thing happened. My father met my mother, Cleopatra Laster. My mother was an orphan. She was orphaned at age 8, born in a small town in Louisiana, but she was sold to another woman who took her to California because in California, where my father came, a black person certainly couldn't buy a house, and it was really hard to find housing. But there were these homes in Oakland where black people could come. Usually it would take 2 men coming together, and they could rent a room in a house together. And the house was cleaned, all the cooking was done by a woman like my mother, who started doing this work at age 12. And my father and my mother met. I think she was 15. I think they got married, she was 16, but let's not double click on that. A magnificent union, and they began building their family. And then something happened. My father was working, very happy to be working. He had a crew of people. The problem was he was black, and he was telling this crew of people what to do. My father's boss came to him and said, "BT, you can't work here anymore." My father said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because people are upset because you're telling white people what to do." "Yeah, but you told me to do that." "Yeah, it doesn't matter. Today's your last day." And that guy you've been training is now going to take your job. So, worst day in my father's life. He's in California, doesn't have a job, and then something happened. It instantly became the best day of his life. He started his own business. The business that he ran until a few years before the end of his life, B.T. Bush Construction. A man full of pride, but it wasn't easy. He couldn't get a bank account, because black people couldn't get a bank account. He needed a truck. Black people couldn't get a truck. So the only way to get a truck is you had to find a white person who would get a loan, and then they'd loan you money, which means you had to pay the bank, but you had to pay them too. That was the experience for my father, but he did it. And he did this, and he was paying for about 7 months, and then for a reason he never understood, they called the loan. Can you imagine that? Having a loan, paying on it, and then they say, you owe us all the money. That's what happened. I heard this story 1,000 times growing up, because the moral my father just wanted to make clear, always have some rainy day money, son. Actually, what he would say is, boy, always have some rainy day money. My father died, I was 26. He called me boy until I was 26. He didn't let anybody else call me boy, okay, but he called me boy. February 5th, 1958, the greatest day of my parents' lives. I was born. So everything was good now. You know, after 2 attempts, my brother and sister, I showed up. Right there in the middle. It's my sister Tina on the left. I love that remarkable woman. And my brother, yeah, on the right. And my brother is Booker T. Bush, Jr. One thing I envy about him is he carries the name of my father. So, what we would do, you know, some families took vacation. We didn't take vacation. We drove to Barnesville, Georgia, so my father could work on my grandparents' home because their home didn't have a bathroom, didn't have running water. So we would go there every summer, and my father would do things to make their home better. And so the drive would start, except it didn't move as fast as this red line. All right? And here's the reason why. Something called the Green Book. I don't know if you're familiar with it. If you look at this book, it says, the book for the Negro Traveler. And what it told you is hotels and motels that you could sleep in, and hotels and motels that you didn't want to go near. And restaurants that you could go in, and restaurants that you really shouldn't go in. But my father was new to California. He didn't have a Green Book. So he learned through his first couple of drives, there was no place to stay. So he drove straight to Barnesville, Georgia, usually pulling over, taking a nap for about an hour. Can you imagine that? With 3 kids in the back? Okay, that's the way it happened. And my mother told us stories about needing to warm the milk for me, because I was a young kid, and if she went in and said, can you warm this? They wouldn't do it because her skin tone was too dark. But my father was light-skinned. They'd warm the milk for him. So this was quite a journey. Now, the thing about it is, my parents made it a good time. Not for my father always. But my mother made it a good time. She made it a vacation. But I just imagine if this was no vacation, this was hell. Okay, but this was our journey. Back to Barnesville where we would go. So before I show you a little something, I just want to help you understand the land. This is the land that my father was born on. This is the land that his father was born on, and he was called on his birth certificate a freed slave. That's my grandfather. So these concepts aren't that far away from me. They are real. Now today, from the point where my father's standing in this photo, everything within a 5-mile radius, Bush family owns that land. So the land where my immediate ancestors were slaves, now owned by people within our family. Let's take a look at the video. See what my father's doing? He's getting water because he had to get it out of the well. There was no running water. Most of his projects, he did a bathroom at a time, running water, and I remember this process. Pigs, as you would expect, one of them's gonna be lunch. You know, the food was great, and that's me. As I tell my sons, I was working when I was 2 years old, so I don't wanna hear it, okay? They never come at me talking about work. You know, I remind my sons now, it's a great place to work. So this was a great experience for me, a formative experience to live in a city like Oakland and Berkeley and then have this kind of an experience. It shaped me. 1979, finished my engineering program at Stanford, went to work at Youll, a place that was a truly great place to work. As I think back on my engineering experience, though, the things I think about most were the work that I did in the community for underrepresented people. I started a training program, an internship program that still exists at Youll today. And that's a photo from the left. And on the right was the start of my very short modeling career. But I want to explain that process. So when there's 6,000 engineers and one of them's black, when you need a diversity photo, I was the guy. All right, so I was getting clicks all over the place. Yeah. So, moved on to Kaiser Permanente, to healthcare. My brother's a physician, finished at Yale, was teaching at Harvard. My sister, critical care ICU nurse, a lot of healthcare in the family. Somehow I gravitated to it on the business side of things. Really enjoyed that experience, but quickly started doing the same thing. I did my job, and I did things to recruit more underrepresented people to the company. So this was just a natural thing to me. You have to do your job and do that job super great and excel, but you have to do this other thing too at the exact same time. 1986. That's my dad. Look at his face. He is happy. He is the happiest in this moment you would ever see him because he's doing his favorite thing, telling me what to do. So that's a look of joy on his face. And so what I said to him was like, hey, Dad, met this woman named Melba. And he goes, yeah, I met her. I go, well, we're going to get married. So he said, okay. And I'm sure at my mother's edging, we proceeded to have the long talk. And he says, boy, got some things to talk to you about. I was like, uh-oh. I looked at my watch. It was 10 o'clock. He said, number one, you know what you need to know, right, boy? I said, yep. That was that. He said, you know she's Chinese, right? I said, yep. Said, you know things are going to be harder than they would otherwise be, right? I said, yep. He said, well, things weren't easy for her people, so she knows the value of hard work. I said, yep. And he said, well, good, because you need to stop running these streets. To that I said nothing, because I wasn't going to admit any guilt or anything in this moment. I just let it keep moving. I looked at my watch, it was still 10 a.m. Okay, that's my father. Man, a few words, but he made his point. August 30th, 1986, Melba and I got married, started our family. 1988, this is my mother and father. My father had recently retired, and he did what he really enjoyed, went to the racetrack on Saturday. But they didn't just go to the racetrack. This is how my parents went to the racetrack, in style. And then something happened. November 1st, I was at the hospital. My father had passed out the day after that photo. We were at the hospital, and it was serious. We were told immediately, it's not good. I called my sister in Portland, Oregon. She immediately came down. I called my brother, who was in Boston at Harvard at the time. He came back. All the panic and chaos that many of you know. You're trying to prepare, but you can't process the reality of what's happening. One day I walked in, and they had told my father, they had just told him, he had 3 to 6 months to live. And I walked in for what I call the eternal talk. He said, boy, I'm not going to live forever, and neither are you. He said, if you can't take it from here, it's your fault. Now that might sound odd. I knew exactly what he meant, and I fully accepted it. He was 100% correct. He said, take care of your mama. And he said, look, I'm on my way out. It's not going to be any 3 to 6 months. I don't want any heroics. That's all he said. I knew exactly what he meant. Don't plug him into anything, no tubes, nothing like that. I got the point. And he said, get me a ballot. I got to vote. All right, that's the thing about my father. You can look through all the logs. My father was the first person to vote in Alameda County every election. He would get to the ballot box at 5 a.m. and just stand in line until it opened. He had to be first. He never talked to us about the importance of voting. He showed us the importance of voting. November 3rd, we arranged the ballot. There was a witness nearby. And my father, the strongest man I have ever met, all he could do was lift his hand and put an X on the ballot. That's all that he could do. But the man voted. This is what prompted me in 2020 in the election to write an article about the importance of voting. I called it 11-3. because that's the day that my father voted, his last vote. And I was trying to urge people, I wasn't telling anybody who to vote for, but just to vote. November 8th, election day, my father died. It was rough. My mother went to pieces, collapsed, literally. She just couldn't keep it together. We were just giving her drugs just to keep her going somehow. And then an angel showed up, my sister, a nurse who became her therapist and her friend. My sister saved her life until this day happened. It's when my son, Matthew, was born in the middle. And his little brother came a couple of years later, Martin. Look at my mother. You could see what's happening on my mother's face. This is a woman who fought cancer 3 times. We thought my mother would go way before my father went. But she had a new purpose now, and it was all about these two. 2008. I'm doing a project, I'm doing many different things. I've had a lot of remarkable experiences in my career. This was one of them. I got called by a group of investors. They had invested in a project in Ghana. There's this thing called Volta Lake, the largest man-made lake in the world. And you can see on the right, there's things that look like trees. That's because they are trees. The US government built a dam and they flooded a forest. On the left, you see the problem with having a lake full of trees. People on boats hit those trees. In Ghana, less than 8% of the people in the country can swim. So about 2,000 people were dying every year by hitting a tree, capsizing. This was the opportunity. So for me, I was told, okay, you got to go get that wood, because this wood was really valuable. It was hardwood that was submerged in water, so it was preserved. So each tree was worth about $7,000. So you can get the business model and the opportunity. But I was worried about the thing on the left, too. We had great success there, created 2,000 jobs among the villages. That's Billy Joe on the left with one of the logs that we got out of the water. And that was the management team. I was the CEO of this business. And for most businesses that are in business in Africa, the executive team doesn't look like this. But this is a pattern. This is a trend. That's why I'm pointing it out. 2015, great place to work. It's the old logo box. I was called by the owner to sell the company. To make a long story short, I bought it. And after I bought it, Tony Bond and I were talking about this last night, I was looking at the list with him, and I said, Tony, I know brothers at all these companies, and they are not a great place to work. And he was like, uh-oh. And I was like, it's got to be a great place to work for all. And so the first summit, I came out and I said, it has to be a great place to work for all. That's how that movement started. That's why we started that movement. And there were some people who were key. That's some Cisco people, I bet. Okay? Yeah. This is a remarkable woman who will be on our stage here tomorrow. Fran was the first chief people officer I met. I was in a cold conference room. I remember it. And she walked in. I said, hi, Fran, nice to meet you. She goes, hi, Michael. She sat down and she said, I don't think we're going to be on your list anymore. I don't think we're doing business with you anymore. I was like, yeah, well, nice to meet you too. I mean, all of a sudden, the temperature went up in the room. And she said, look, Michael, everyone's innovating. You're not innovating. You're doing the same. I'm like, Fran, I've been here 2 weeks. He's like, yeah, well, whatever. You better get busy. All right? And I did get busy. She was a great impetus and a great supporter of the change of For All. Ann Marr, Worldwide Technology. Another woman who's like, I don't know what you're doing, but I like the sound of it. Anything we can do to help, let me know. Gail King from Nationwide. Any Nationwide people here? Another woman had said, I don't know what you're doing, but I like the sound of it. This is right, and the time is right. 2017, we had our first book. I guess it's our only book. Called Great Place to Work for All. Our first For All Summit, where we were all about it at that point. 2018, another For All Summit. We launched something called Emprising. It didn't even work yet. It was just screenshots. You know, built by the genius of Paul Wolcott, the president of our business, and Todd Garrison. Give those two men a round of applause. This platform is capturing sentiment, employee experience in 67 languages, more than all the other listening tools combined. Phenomenal system, just taking over the world. 2019. Yeah, we had some fun too. Any of you there? I'll move off of that quick. 2020 came together for a Fall Summit in early March 2020, but we were talking about transformation. We were talking about this idea of complete change, this idea of a caterpillar that had a purpose and then goes in a chrysalis and finds a new purpose, its real purpose, the purpose that's calling the caterpillar. We talked about a butterfly who had no recollection of its memory as a caterpillar. And we were talking about how could leaders do that? How could we do that? And we talked about how it would take humility and curiosity to create a butterfly effect where we could do things together that we could never do on our own. And then COVID happened. Little did we know this would be our chrysalis. This would be the thing that would change us forever if we allowed the change to happen. And then when things just couldn't get any worse, May 25th, 2020, they did. I'll never forget this moment. I was sitting in my home office on, a call. I don't remember what it was, Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams. I love everybody. Okay, but there was a camera on. Something was happening. My youngest son was staying with us. He was making coffee, and he said, "Dad, you see the video?" First of all, he rarely talks to me, okay? Never interrupts me. And he's like, "Dad, see the video?" I said, "Video?" I'm thinking, what? And he's like, "You see the video?" He goes, "You got to see the video." I'm like, okay. So I go back in and I start Googling, and I see the video. And I hit it, and it was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I kept thinking the video was locked up. And I watched this thing just like you did, and had the horror just like you did. How could this be happening? What is happening? What is happening? Well, in my life's experience, I knew pretty quickly what was happening, but I watched it too. And then I'm looking at the screen where people are talking about something. And I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about, but maybe they haven't seen the video. And immediately I think about my sons, and especially my son who did what he doesn't normally do, and what was going on in his mind, how he was trying to make sense in this crazy world of what was happening. And the thing that killed me in that video more than anything else is that George Floyd did exactly what I would have done. He was calling out his mother's name, because I'm a mama's boy. And that's what he was doing. That's what killed me in that video. And then I just thought about my sons who have a father who looks kind of like this, and had to deal with the fact that there are some people who really don't like people who look like this. They don't know them. They just really don't like them. This is the reality. And I have two sons to work through this situation and to help deal with this reality, because it is real. And then people who were inside their homes, maybe they don't want to go back to the office, but they got out and protested. They decided to let the world know how they felt. People responded. We responded to a Great Place to Work. We put out a blog talking about, hey, there's two viruses. There's this COVID, and then there's the 400-year-old virus called racism. And always our message was on point. What could you do in your company to create a more caring, open, listening environment? Because there was people who were in pain and suffering. And it wasn't just black people, it's a whole lot of people. People have plenty of purpose. That became clear. People just need leaders who also have purpose. We also learned through the COVID experience, you should really trust people. People are remarkable. Don't you feel this way? You should trust people more based on what they did, based on working people, taking care of your customers while sitting on the edge of a bed, sometimes feeding an elderly parent. People were absolutely remarkable through this time. September 1st, 2021, got bought by UKG. A great experience for me, for my family, and for everybody at Great Place to Work. Can I hear from you if you're from Great Place to Work out there? I think we have about 80 countries in the room, and we've always had a vision. Small company, wanted to impact the world. We can actually do it now. This is Arent, who was the CEO at the time. He's now the executive chairman, and the CEO role is now taken by Chris Todd. He doesn't have big shoes to fill. He's got big shoes. He's ready to make amazing things happen, and amazing things are going to happen. World keeps spinning. June 24th, Roe v. Wade gets overturned. I'm not asking you for your point of view, but let me tell you, there were people suffering. We had a day of understanding, which is what we do whenever something crazy happens in the world. We're doing them now about once a week. We came together to deal with this one. I saw pain and suffering and fear, this sense of people feeling like another shoe was about to drop. We put out a blog saying, leaders and allies, we need you now. We need you right now. Again, trying to help people understand how to use the analytics to create a great place to work for all. October 12th, 2022 brings us here today. The future of work is not clickbait. It's not one of those words you drop in there so a lot of people will read your article. The future of work is for all. And that's why we're here. Why? Because businesses have to improve their performance, their productivity, their rate of innovation, and decrease their carbon footprint. These are very, very difficult things to do. That's why the future of work is for all. Or your business is going to get smaller. It's one or the other. For two reasons. Number one, innovation requires a personal commitment. It's an all-in commitment. I don't know anybody who innovated without an obsession towards making things better. Ask a question, are you willing to give extra effort? That's our indicator of whether you've got an innovative culture or not. It has to become personal. If it's not personal, things aren't going to change. And you need the best people. Your organization needs the best people based on the challenges that they're facing. Are you sure you have the best people today? How do you know? Is your performance system that perfect? You don't have to tell me because I know the answer. Okay, we have a lot of work to do here. The reality is if you take 400 data points, you get something called a normal distribution. And when you take any demographic, any single one in your organization, and you think about them in terms of performance, if you're measuring, you're going to get a graph pretty much like this. On the right-hand side, you're going to get your high achievers that are super, doing a lot of remarkable things in the company. Then in the middle, you're going to have people who are maybe on their way to being a high achiever. And on the far left, you're going to have people who, frankly, shouldn't be there. They just aren't performing. Maybe a leader's not developing them, or maybe they're just a bad match, or maybe they were just not the right hire. But this is the reality in every organization, and everybody in this room knows this. Here's the key. Here's the for all message. This is what you want. You want the far right-hand side of every demographic group. This is the search, especially for you people. You can't think that you can possibly have the best people with a dominant group. Okay, this is the mathematics underneath diversity. What prevents this fear? Fear of losing what you have? Fear of not getting what you want? I love DEIB, unless it hurts me. But how come so many allies aren't afraid? We got any allies in here? Yeah. This is the thing. There's a lot of people, and I know you're here today, who aren't afraid. You talk about purpose, performance, and equity. Based on the challenges facing your business, do you want people in your company who are afraid? Do you want people in your company who can veto the progress you're trying to make? This is real for some people. They are afraid that somehow people are going to lose what they have. We need people who trust that their organization would support them. If someone says reverse discrimination, maybe they don't trust you, that you're going to take care of them. If an underrepresented minority says discrimination, they normally don't last too long in the organization, or their career kind of stalls out. How come people can say reverse discrimination and stay in the organization so long? This is where the hard work begins. Does your organization have the courage to change the things that it can? Do you have the courage to help change your organization? The sound of courage. How many of you out there have been told you're not going to be anything, you're not going to be successful, and here you are today? If so, let me hear you. Any women out there, let me hear you. That's the sound of courage. That's what courage sounds like. Any people of color out there, let me hear you. Anybody who didn't fit those categories, let me hear you. That's the sound of courage. If it's not personal, you'll never achieve your purpose. I love this quote. You know who said it? Me, today. So, just rounding things out with the picture of my father, this great man. My father had this hat, which I still have. When I'm having a tough problem, I put his hat on. And when I'm sick, I put on his house shoes. And they both heal me. They restore me. They get me focused. They get me recommitted to my purpose. I want to talk about 2 miracles. Miracle number 1. My son, my youngest, when he was 11 years old, brought this home. It's a painting that he did of my father. And he did woodwork around the painting. Well, my father was a woodworker. He didn't know all the things my father had built. But this is what he did. This is why I call it the miracle. And on the bottom, it says, my grandpa always said, hey, boy. He never met his grandpa. These were the stories I told him when he was a baby, and I was holding him, talking to him about his grandfather. They got in his brain. That's why I know my father is in him. My grandfather is in him. So I call this the miracle. When he gave it to me, my eyes welled up with tears. He was 11, but I'm that crazy man who doesn't want my son to see me cry. So I just did that. Oh, no, I just got a cold. Okay? But it was waterworks when he brought this home. I consider it to be a miracle. Talking about miracles, September 3rd, 2 days after we got bought by UKG. Oh, yeah. This is my grandson. Damn, that's a big baby on this stage. So, you can probably guess what I call him. Boy. Right here, I'm like, hey, boy. As soon as I see him, I'm, hey, boy. And he's working to call me Big Daddy. Because that's what I called, it's a Southern thing. That's what I called my grandfather. And I look at him, I'm like, hey, boy, you're going to be doing big things. I don't know what they are. You're going to be doing big things. To my friends, I call him the frickin' future. Okay? And he looks at me, and I feel a sense of accountability. I think he's like, hey, man, you better get to work and do something. All right? I just feel something. And what I know about the future of work, he's not going to be talking about hybrid. He's not going to be talking about quiet quitting. He's not going to be talking about acting your wage. He's going to be talking about, can I have an opportunity? If I work my brains out, can I get promoted? Can I get paid fairly? Are you going to care about my physical, mental, and financial health? That's what he's going to be talking about, because that's the future of work. Good people, the future of work is you. The future of work is us. The future of work is for all. Thank you very much for listening today. Have a great summit. Thank you very much.